Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Big Gov Guys podcast. I'm your host Connor Flynn, joined by my friends and co-hosts Max Friedman and Spencer Anderson. We are three high school students from the town of Natick, Massachusetts, who've long been interested in the workings of the government and have been civically oriented. As I said, this is our first episode, and today I'll be talking about the Georgia Senate race runoffs, a stimulus package on Capitol Hill, and a potential Trump 2024 run. So we hope you stay, and we hope you enjoy. This is a project that has been long in the making. So thank you, and let's begin.
So for our first segment, I figured we would just look into Georgia and the double runoff elections for their two Senate seats. I think it's probably the biggest news story right now in the politics world. So Max, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously, I don't think going into the election cycle, a lot of people predicted that the entire control of the Senate would come down to two races in Georgia of all states. But I personally think that the biggest question of this race is that will Trump's claims of fraud potentially siphon off enough voters for Ossoff and Warnock to win? I mean, according to the Secretary of State, he even siphoned off enough votes for Biden to win in the general. So it's going to be interesting to see that if this is just, a narrative people are talking about, or is this something that will have a real impact?
All right, so on the issue sort of the campaign down in Georgia, you have Warnock and Ossoff, who, are, of course, in a very tight race down there. And I think sort of as the backdrop to what's happening in Georgia, you have the whole fight on the Hill over the stimulus package for the virus. Now, it's sort of been made clear that for McConnell and Senate Republicans, they, are not ones who, want to see a lot of stuff go into this bill for their own reasons. And I think Warnock and Ossoff have a great opportunity here to tell the people of Georgia that, look, if the Senate stays red, Joe Biden, who you all voted for, who the state voted for, is up against a real challenge in Mitch McConnell, who has said that he will, stall most, if not all, of what Biden will want to do, especially on stuff such as this bill. So I think that, if John Ossoff and Warnock want to, show the people of Georgia exactly what they are for, then just, say exactly that. And it's that, the other side has been for a long time very stingy on, spending issues. And now more than ever, it is important for them to get real relief in the hands of people.
Yeah, I think that the threat is not only that they won't have control. The threat is that if you don't have control, it's Mitch McConnell who is going to be the majority leader. I mean, just the other day, he scrapped a relief bill where you actually had enough people on both sides of the aisle agree on it. So I'm not even convinced that McConnell would pass anything, as it might look favorable for Biden. So I think that this election would be incredibly crucial in any moment. But because you have Mitch McConnell, who's the majority leader, who, if they get both seats, that status is reduced, that would be a gigantic victory. Like, really, one of the most important wins in, modern history.
Well, yeah, I haven't really seen them, directly campaign against McConnell. Like, you'll see Republicans and Democrats do this all the time, where instead of campaigning against their opponent, they'll say,
right,
do you really want to give Chuck Schumer / Mitch McConnell control of the Senate? And Ossoff has just been more like, David Perdue's corrupt, he doesn't have touch, he's corrupt. And then Warnock is, kind of the same message. Like, Loeffler got the endorsement from, Marjorie Taylor Greene and all that, and sits down for interviews with white supremacists and that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Which, look, whatever Stacey Abrams is having them do, I'm sure is
right,
the best path. But I think it's interesting how I don't really know what my point is, but yeah.
No, but I mean, and then on sort of the topic of Georgia, you have Trump, who is in Georgia today. At his, I think, first rally since the election. And much has been said about will his supporters even vote in the Senate election because of his false claims about fraud and the election was rigged and this and that. And his strategy, I think, here is that he goes down to Georgia, says they stole it from me, don't let them steal it from you. Vote, 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 and ensure that at least some chamber stays with our party. So
I mean, I'll take a risk and I'll go on the record here as the skeptic that that's gonna happen. Like I just don't quite buy the narrative that people aren't gonna show up to vote because they don't have faith in like the sanctity of the elections or the integrity of the elections.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a coherent narrative, but like
right.
Well,
everything from sort of Trump world has not been that consistent, right? You have the president saying vote for these senators, and then you have people who are surrounding the president. His most, everyone who has been, by his side, I shouldn't say, it's just a few people, but have said it was fraud and it was rigged. So I guess once again you have, Trump and his people saying one thing, saying something else, and there's no real what happened here for most Georgia Republicans.
Yeah, I think that we're seeing this somewhat of an implosion of a lot of Republicans who have gladly supported Trump for these last 4 years, but realizing that, wait, us totally blindly agreeing with his claims of fraud, it could actually have a consequence. And now we're actually seeing that implosion, and I think that this Georgia Senate race could be the kind of grand finale of this fight between Republicans who realize that no, there's not fraud, vote, we want power, and Trump and his side who are so committed to their own egos that they will not accept a basic loss.
And then also something on sort of your point there, Max, is that so the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, since he was elected in 2018, has been a staunch supporter of the president, right? And you just saw actually last week, I think online, you heard from the president, stop stupid Brian Kemp, he's insulting him, and all of these names for Mr. Kemp, who has stood by the president for a very long time through thick and thin, through all the stuff that he says that is incredibly inaccurate. But it just shows you that Trump, he takes no prisoners, and that he has from the inside imploded the party.
Well, hopefully he gets primaried, and then Stacey Abrams will have an easier time winning in 2 years.
Well, yeah.
But I do want to sort of focus us back a bit on the Senate races, and I was reading an interesting article, and I was just trying to find it. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the exact same article, but it was looking at the effect of decreased turnout, which obviously the runoff elections are going to have lower turnout than the general did. And generally that has helped Republicans because it's been suburban white people who are a higher proportion of the electorate in runoff elections when there's lower turnout. It's been Cobb and Gwinnett County, which are two largely white but diversifying suburban counties in Atlanta, who the last time Georgia had a runoff in 2008, they showed up to vote and they gave the Republican the win. But of course, it's changed now in that they are both deeply, deeply Democratic. So I guess the question is that are these voters in the post-Trump era, are they going to remain Democrats? Are they going to vote for Ossoff and Warnock? Because I think there's a decent case for them both winning, because I saw somebody did the math that if the shift in the electorate from the 2008 general to the runoff remain the same, then they would both win by like 2 or 3.
Sure.
So I guess it's really a question of like whether the math, like I think on paper there's a decent case that they should win, but for reasons I can't quite explain, I remain skeptical. Honestly, I think I know a lot of things. I have no idea about this. I could honestly see both of the Republicans winning by 10 or both of the Democrats winning by 10, just because of the volatility and what the electorate could look like. And we really, really have no idea who's actually going to show up to vote.
Sure. No, I mean, now just, I think in that you had said some stuff about the voters, those, swing voters, I guess, in Georgia, who, are sort of whiter, more rich, more in suburbia.
Yeah, I'm
right?
looking.
Who in the past had voted for Republicans, right? Now, if those people switch, I don't see switch happening with them in the sense that I feel like Trump himself, as a man, as the president, has revealed a lot of things about the party that for a lot of those people they didn't want to accept for a very long time. And for those people who I would only assume hold themselves in high regard, for them to vote along with everything that has happened in the last 4 years that they've been repulsed by, I can't see that happening. I still think it is an uphill battle for Warnock.
It will happen. It's a question of how much. Like, I'm looking at, and I'll link this wherever we post it. I'm looking at a map that shows how Biden did in Georgia versus how Ossoff did, and it has Biden in purple and Ossoff in yellow. And most of the state is purple, and the areas that are the darkest purple, suggesting that Biden won the most Republican voters, is like the wealthiest areas of North Atlanta. So I mean, it's hard to believe because it's not entirely logical. Why would you vote for Biden and then vote for a Republican senator who ties himself to Trump and is extremely close to Trump and is a very enthusiastic supporter of the president?
Right.
And split ticket voting is it decreases every cycle, right? But it still exists, and it's still enough in close elections. Like,
and it has an effect on things.
Yeah. Like Purdue won more votes than Ossoff did, right? None of them got to 50%, but he did win more.
Yep.
And
which is obviously a threat.
Yeah. So those people, as intolerable and incomprehensible and illogical as they may be, they exist, and they're a very small group, but they're large enough to flip elections.
Yeah, I think that something like 50,000 people voted for Biden and Purdue. Like, it was a pretty sizable number.
Right.
It's looking like 100,000. Yeah.
100,000. So I think that a lot of these people just specifically hate Trump, which, to be honest, I thought going into the election there would be a lot more Republicans who were like, I'm turning on Trump. That really wasn't the case. Right. But it seems like there are a lot of voters who still have the conservative values, but just specifically think that Trump is the source of all issues of the Republican Party. Now, I think that that's not the most logical line of thinking based on the ideologies of these senators, but that's how they view it. And I do think that number will decrease. I think the most of the people who are going to vote, a lot of those people who went split ticket, they just want Trump out of there, and now he's gone.
No, and I think exactly what you just said, Max, goes back to how Joe Biden ran his campaign, right? He ran a campaign just based off of, I am against Trump, and I am not Trump, and I am a way better person than Trump is. And for people, right, left, or center, who are just repulsed by Trump, they are, of course, going to vote for Biden. I think for a lot of these people, they do still hold those sort of like old-time values of sort of like the GOP and those values that are right of center. But if Joe Biden had ran some other style campaign, I think for him, especially in a place like Georgia, it would have gone much, much worse. Now, I had heard throughout the cycle from people who were upset that Biden wasn't being, as staunch on some issues. but he had to brand himself as someone who was the healer and someone who was not obsessed with his own agenda, but was doing things for the good of the country in getting rid of Trump.
Any sort of decision, it has its upsides and it has its downsides, right? Like, this is a pretty overused point, but I mean, it's just true that Biden supported the $15 minimum wage, but he never talked about it.
Right.
He never mentioned it. It was deep in his policy page, and then it gets over 60% of the vote in Florida, and it passes. And this is the same conversation with weed, right? Where I believe it's what's his latest poll show? 68, 70% of people think that we should decriminalize weed.
Yep.
And then there will be congressional Democrats who vote against it because they think they need to be moderate because they misunderstand where the moderate voter is. People try to conform to the median voter, but they don't actually listen to the data on where the median voter is.
I still happen to think that if, someone is not voting for Trump and someone's voting for, either one of those senators down in Georgia, that they are someone who holds values that are conservative, right? I mean,
you're over rationalizing voters here, right? Something like 15% of voters in Florida voted for a $15 minimum wage in Trump. It's not rational, and it's very, very hard to understand why people do this, right? Because it makes no sense at all. But that's kind of the challenge, right? And look, most people don't care that much about issues, right? I think if Biden had run a perfect campaign and had looked at the polling data and said, yeah, we're going to talk about weed a lot. Yeah, we're going to talk about a minimum wage a lot. And yeah, we're going to talk about how defunding the police is bad. Then, I think the improvements would have been marginal. He was never going to win Texas. He was never going to win Iowa or Ohio in hindsight. But those kind of improvements on the margins matter.
Yeah, I think that I'm not criticizing Biden's campaign. I mean, he got the intended outcome, including flipping Georgia and Arizona, which haven't gone blue in a while. But I do think that if there's anything Trump's taught us, it's that if you can really appeal to the extreme voter, if you can really go at a set of issues and be strong about it and take a firm stand, that will get people to vote.
Sure.
And I think that in congressional races, we saw the Democrats suffer. And I think that in the future of the Democrat Party should be one that appeals to the working class and can take a further left stance.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, speaking of Trump, some reports have been, surfacing in the last week, suggesting that the president will be making an announcement the week Joe Biden is sworn in as president about his future plans. Some people have said that he might announce he is in the race for the next election for president in 4 years. So, I would just say for Trump, I think we all might say this is very on brand. For him, he has said, I guess, in private that he won't be at the inauguration, and he will be somewhere else on that day doing something else. Now, with that being said, Joe Biden has said that some senators have reached out to him by phone, saying, I hope to work with you and this, that, and the other thing. And, he has said that he may or may not have talked to McConnell. He still hasn't said if he has or not, and I'll just assume that he has, right? It just shows you still how Trump, as a lame duck, still holds just so much control over this party. I mean, it's just been completely hijacked.
Look, this is an important point, I think, which is don't give these people credit for the bare minimum.
Sure.
Yeah.
I saw a poll of Georgia where they talked about they asked people what's your opinion on the Secretary of State of Georgia, and the majority of Democrats say they approve of him. Meanwhile, this is a guy who's basically Brian Kemp, Karen Handel light, and is just working to basically further voter suppression. But he did not openly steal an election, so he's good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what people love to do, and by people I mean Democrats, where you're just searching to credit the Republicans for something.
Mm-hmm.
So like a Republican senator privately congratulating Biden on winning and not doing it publicly. Like we can't have our standards
That's just
dragged
weak.
down
Yeah.
so far that we start crediting people for that.
That's
right?
seriously weak.
We can't be crediting Susan Collins for saying that she's concerned about whatever Trump did last week. Like it's just so sad to see people's standards just go down and down and down.
I just think that on back to the topic of Trump 2024, I feel like we should not write this off as a Trump win just yet, because I think we underestimate the impact that, or like the power that Trump loses when he's no longer in the day-to-day decision-making process. I think that he will lose a substantial amount of grip, and especially if the Democrats get the Senate,
right?
We can see a good Biden presidency that would further weaken his standing, and I think there is a good chance he stays very prominent. Like if he gets into Newsmax, if he can keep up appearances, if he's look at Biden's messing up this, Biden's messing up that.
What if he does rallies for 4 years?
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's always this strong chance that he can just devolve off into like the old crazy man tweeting and no longer seen as like
I think if he runs, right? If he runs in 2024, he will win the nomination.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree with
I'd say
that.
Without a doubt. Who could take him on?
Yeah,
I think he's the favorite. I think that like if I were to pick one person, who do I think is going to be the nominee? I would pick Trump.
I think he's well above 50% to get it.
I don't think that you can just say, oh, the second Trump runs, he's in. I think overall though, this is definitely a good strategy for him because it's going to help him maintain his influence on Republicans.
Right.
And if Democrats try to prosecute him, they'll say, oh, you're just trying to cancel out your biggest political opponent.
Sure, and I also think that strategy long-term for the GOP has now changed, right? So I think after this election, they understand that, like, saying they stole it just is not feasible. Like, they've been losing every case, right? So in the future, I think what's going to happen is something like Georgia back in the last midterms, right? Suppressing voting and stuff like that.
Well,
I think will be
and say that the election was stolen.
No. But I think it's clear, just based off of the last few years, that one of those things is a lot more effective. Yeah, I mean, I
think that the way that Trump has operated is, that's always been that's always in the last 20 years. That's been always the kind of like low key Republican strategy. Like they've always somewhat gone after those policies, but they've never been so extreme. But Trump has said the quiet part out loud, and it's been a smash hit. So I think that regardless of what happens to Trump, his style is not going away anytime soon. It will take a lot more big election losses.
I want to present like a bit of a terrifyingly plausible doomsday scenario.
Good.
Which is, it doesn't take much to happen. Either one or both of the Republicans win in Georgia, or Joe Manchin decides to just not cooperate at all.
Nice.
And in this case, you'd probably see a situation where Mitch McConnell can basically ruin Biden's presidency. Can basically prevent a recovery
That's
from
essentially
happening
what he did with Obama.
and induce a recession. Well, Obama had a trifecta for 2 years though, so he could actually pass a stimulus package. But
after like
imagine that. But Obama never had 60 senators and 240 odd seats in the House. Right. And in that situation, unfortunately, voters are dumb, and we don't think, oh, it's Mitch McConnell doing all this. We think, oh, wow, life really sucks. The economy's terrible. And who's president? Oh, it's Biden.
Yep, and he gets thrown out.
Yeah, look, I got to tell you, I think it is very, very plausible to see Trump run and win in 2024. I think he has the nomination next to locked up.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, if it's a bad economy, now granted 4 years from now, who knows? I'm not an economist.
Right.
Hopefully one day. But 4 years from now, if the recovery is still really, really bad, then I don't know if Biden runs again. I don't know if Harris runs or somebody else. I don't know if it matters that much who the candidate is.
No. Yeah. Look, if it's Trump versus Biden or Harris, it's Trump versus whoever it is. Like that part's not important, right? Like Biden and Harris are sort of like interchangeable here, and Trump is like he's Trump. Like he sucks the energy out of everything in the room, and it's all on him. He's obsessed with attention. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just don't see a feasible way sitting here again 4 years out that if he runs, he does not at least get the nomination.
So you can go next.
Another interesting thing Trump said, which I actually think is a pretty fair point, is that he said that Biden's too boring to cover. The media is just going to focus on me. And the reason why we're even in this situation is because MSNBC and CNN thought Trump was this like hilarious circus act in 2015. And then they got him to this point. So I think over the next 4 years, they're going to do a pretty good job to keep him relevant because he's going to do whatever he's going to do.
No, I mean, he sells.
Yeah.
He sells. Okay.
I guess just the one, like, I guess to play devil's advocate to what I just said is he's the initial, like, shock value of his presidential run. That's never coming back. That happened. And he's not the president anymore. So what exactly is he bringing to the table over these next 40 years that's going to make him of interest?
Mm-hmm. So I was just looking, Max and I were doing some math the other day looking at the Electoral College, and this is something that I think this is going to be maybe Trump's the pinnacle of his legacy is making it so the coalitions are so different, and the Republicans are so strong in Midwestern states like Ohio and Iowa that they just have a permanent advantage winning the presidency. I'm looking right now, and in 2016, the Electoral College had a 2.8% bias for the Republicans. What that means is that Hillary could have won the popular vote by more than she did, by about 0.7 more than she did. She could have won by 2.8, and she would have lost. And this year, even though obviously Biden won, he's going to win by like 4.5. The Electoral College bias got even worse. Ohio shifted right relative to the country. They voted like 12, 13 points to the right of the country. Same with Iowa. And then obviously Florida, who knows what happened there. But
who knows what happened
I think
in Florida.
Trump's appeal is that even if he alienates lots of people, it doesn't matter that he's losing by more and more in New Jersey. And he's losing votes in Utah.
Right.
Because he's making up for them in states like Iowa and Ohio. And it's just mathematically. Now, look, Trump is not some evil genius who sat down and did this math 4 years ago, but the cards have sort of panned out for him. And, I mean, it's a very, very beneficial situation for the Republican Party where they can lose the popular vote by a significant margin and still reliably rely on the Electoral College to get them over the line.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, at least in the near future, thinking about what Biden has to do as the president in the first, 100 days, it all comes back to Georgia. I mean, every single thing that he wants to do, it all stems from who wins those races in Georgia.
Yep.
And if John Ossoff and Warnock lose their races, then he is up against a wall in the sense that everything he now has to do is essentially through executive action, right? I mean, if you look at history, right, with Obama, he got stonewalled his last few years in office and they got zero done, right? I mean, Sandy Hook happened and these people didn't budge, right? I mean, this is how intense this has gotten, that a school shooting happened and still zero results on a single bill with guns, and it's the same guy in control of the Senate. So I mean, I would just say that, just vote if you can. But
so
I mean, I don't think there's anyone who's listening to this in Georgia, but I mean, if you're in Georgia, then I think you understand what's at stake.
So Connor, I noticed you said if Ossoff and Warnock win like a package deal, and I figured that we could all risk a little piece of our credibility here and go on the record. It seems to be widely accepted that Warnock is going to do better than Ossoff.
Yeah.
Because
he's up against a
Kelly
real nut job.
Is ridiculous. But no, it's not.
But then there's Purdue, who's a nut job.
I promise the listener, it's not just prognostication.
Okay.
It's empirically true because in the runoff elections, in the special election, the votes for the two parties was basically tied. Meanwhile, Ossoff or Purdue did better than Ossoff. So it is empirically true that people seem to be more willing to go for Warnock than Ossoff. So I guess we can just go in a circle here. How many points better do you think Warnock will do than Ossoff? This is just a complete guess that you will be judged for.
So here's Max.
I'll say I saw a poll by the Trafalgar Group, which is known for ridiculousness, which actually had
no. I saw that.
Right. Yeah, it had Loeffler ahead, but I will base it off the fact that. So I'm just predicting how much Warnock will do ahead of Ossoff.
Yeah.
All right, I saw +5, but I feel like in reality the gap is going to be closer than that.
No. Let's do Warnock percent. Like there's different ways you can calculate this. Let's just do Warnock percent minus Ossoff percent of the vote.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna say the most recent thing I saw was +5, but I feel like in reality it's going to be closer than that because you're going to filter out a lot of split ticket voters and you're going to filter out some Trump voters who think it's rigged. Mm-hmm. So I'll say let's just say +3.
Really? Yeah, I would say, look, at the end of the day, here in Georgia, I think that people understand the stakes. It's red Senate versus blue Senate. And I don't think with this election you'll see a lot of split ticket. So I'll just go out on a limb and say like 0.5 to 1%. I think he will do better than Ossoff, but not by as much as everyone thinks, because at the end of the day, it's right versus left. Like, that is essentially all this is.
Yep. I agree with Connor, 100%. So I figured next up we would transition to what could be our final segment, depending on how much time we end up having left, which is the state of the day. And for this, we're just going to look at one state and how they voted this past election last month at the presidential level, the Senate level, maybe some House races if we have time.
Sure.
So today's, for some reason, we're going to be starting with South Carolina.
Nice.
Obviously, pretty red state. Their main importance is the South Carolina primary. So all said and done, Trump won South Carolina by 11.68 points, which means that, looking at this, if I can get the data up. Okay, it shifted 2.6 points to the left in since 2016. So Biden did 2.6 points better than Hillary Clinton. So still not a competitive state. Obviously, neither of them, neither Biden nor Trump actually spent any money there. Where the real money was spent was in the Senate race, right?
Well, Harrison did do about like a point and a half better. He lost by 10.3. So he about like 1.4 better.
Yeah, which is, that's decent. Lindsey Graham is not a very popular senator, and that's for a variety of reasons. Like a lot of people think he's a rhino and all that. But I'm looking at the money right now. Lindsey Graham spent $97.3 million, and Jamie Harrison spent $129.8 million, which is just unheard of amounts of money. And like I believe this is the most expensive Senate race of all time. And at the end of the day, it didn't even turn out to be that competitive.
Right. No,
yeah.
I think
I didn't know what to say. This is ridiculous.
I mean, like, Spencer's sitting here stunned at this.
Yeah.
And
of course, Amy McGrath raised like $89 million.
Yeah, so. No. I think on this, though, at the end of the day, sort of like you're saying, is that South Carolina is just going to South Carolina. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I view Jamie Harrison as the strongest guy that we could have put up for that state. Yeah. Like, without a doubt. Like, he he seemed friendly. He was smart.
Yeah,
he was nice.
I thought that too. I'm not sold now.
I think no. I mean, the things that he did in the campaign. Now, again, as an observer from Massachusetts, I'm not on the front lines here, but I'll say that I thought at the time, and I still do think that he was the strongest guy that we could have had in South Carolina, and I think especially Graham, who is very high profile, who's in the news very often. He had a strong wall of support behind him, and I think that when push comes to shove, folks are going to be partisan. Well, that's what happened.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that about like I said to Connor in like August or something that like Jamie Harrison seems like the best like Democratic candidate in the South since like Zell Miller or something, but like. I feel like generic like Lindsey Graham is really really unpopular in South Carolina. He is a like -8, -6 or something, which is much worse than Trump. So I think that generic Democrat is automatically going to do 1.5 points better than
right.
Biden, and I think this connects to a larger point, which is that. Like what a tremendous waste of money ultimately from both parties.
Yeah.
But like in this case, it's somewhat justifiable because the race did look competitive, and actual people who know what they're talking about said that Harrison had a chance. But like things like Amy McGrath raising almost $90 million, like I don't know why like the DSCC doesn't do something about that and like institute like a 50% tax on Act Blue donations or something like that. So these old wine moms who want to see Mitch McConnell lose, like
seriously,
it's just a tragedy how much money is wasted, and like not even in a political context either, because like this could have gone to like feeding kids. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what my point is.
Also to connect this race to a larger point, going back to the idea of like Biden versus Trump and the whole strategy. This race, I think, was a slap in the face to a lot of people that we can just say, oh, like look at how like slimy Lindsey Graham is. Look at all these things he's done. Look at how much he bows down to Trump. Isn't that so bad? Don't you hate Trump? And a lot of people were just like, no, we are Republicans. We still believe in those values.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no like not to diss the Lincoln Project here, but they really didn't do anything. And I think this race proves it. And I think that if you already know that you're not going to get these middle of the road people that don't even necessarily exist, just like go big or go home.
Well, we'll talk disparagingly about the Lincoln Project later, but I don't think this race is at all indicative of what they did or didn't do. I think we're approaching like almost 40 minutes now.
Yeah.
I figure we should probably wrap it up.
A long time.
We had a few other things we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
We're thinking of doing a like district of the day segment, and getting into local politics a bit. I know the main story is that there's some police bill that's going to go to Baker's desk.
Massachusetts politics.
But I'm thinking we'll just cover that next time.
Yeah. All right. Good first episode.
All right. Sweet.
Right.
So, this has been our first episode. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you soon.